Hey Nils.
Hey, Alex.
We are here to talk about the future of spatial AI. There is a paradigm. There's a paradigm shift in the general population's mind, and it is that technological innovation doesn't necessarily mean a better life or a better future. People tend to be more cautious, less optimistic about big tech and new devices than they were 15 years ago. Yet, generative AI companies such as OpenAI have experienced the biggest growth ever seen before. That was in the last year. What do you make of this paradox? And how can we explain it through reason, maybe?
I think as a society, we learned a very harsh lesson with the rise of social media. There were a lot of unforeseen consequences to how we interact with each other, how we grow up, how we form our perceptions of the world, how we form our opinions, how we form our politics. Social media ended up really shaking us up as a society and changing a lot of how we interact with each other. In many cases for the better, but also in some very notable cases for the worse. And I think we didn't have any such experience in recent living memory with anything else that really made us go like, oh, I wish we could undo this. And now that social media happened to us, we are more cautious, I think, as a civilization, more mindful of how things can go wrong. But the kind of worry that we're seeing about AI and unemployment is a perennial issue. This is something that keeps coming back decade after decade with every new major innovation. People were afraid that industrialization would lead to mass unemployment. People were afraid of various agricultural improvements leading to mass unemployment, the internet leading to mass unemployment. There's an optimistic view that thinks that society always just keeps reshaping itself and humans find new things to do, that by removing labor, we free up more human creativity and we'll find other things to do and other things to consume. Like we consume things today that we never would have imagined consuming 200 years ago. 200 years ago, there was no market for being a YouTube creator. One, because no one had the time to consume it, and two, because no one had the time to produce it. The ultimate question for the pessimist side of this is, does this trend ever stop somewhere catastrophically where all of a sudden it gets difficult for people to put food on the table? And I think movements like the universal basic income movement are trying to really wrestle with this idea that it's possible that we'll end up in a place where it's very hard for a human to find any kind of job. Like what happens in a nightmarish scenario where rich people have very little work that they have to do themselves, but they own a lot of robots and AI that does work for them, and they don't have to employ any poorer people, and the poorer people literally don't know how to feed themselves. So I'm not sure which one of these camps I'm in myself. I am both optimistic and fearful for the future. I think it's definitely difficult to stop technology. So it can be helpful to try to be optimistic, but it can also, be important for us to realize that we have to be careful with how we develop things. I see this increasingly, actually, even in our own social media engagements. I've been doing entrepreneurship for a long time, but never before have I had the reception that we get sometimes now. We put out a cool new demo, we show some new feature, and there will always be someone that is unhappy with building out better capabilities for AI and unhappy with making augmented reality better. People are afraid, clearly, that civilization is changing in ways that are not going to be good. And as a human, I feel very conflicted when I read those messages. Our latest interaction, we were showing this thing that we were very excited about. I was very excited about showing off some spatial AI that we had built for a retail environment. And we got a negative comment saying like, oh, this is just what humanity needs, more automation, less connection. And it was illustrated to me of how complex the situation really is, because I know from our pilot studies how this technology is being used. I know that it is helping people in retail be more productive, to feel more confident on the job, to work better as a team. But I also know that we're helping people that would have had a tough time in other jobs. There are many people working in retail, at least with some of the pilots we have, that have some form of disability or cognitive impairment, and the ability to receive clearer instructions using spatial AI is helpful to them. So on the one hand, approaching it optimistically, okay, we're empowering someone with a cognitive impairment to feel better at work, do better at work, be more productive, and actually help secure them a job. That's someone that might otherwise fall through the cracks and have a tough time. On the other hand, I also understand this fear that, well, eventually this technology will just replace that worker entirely. Maybe. I don't fully understand the universal forces that drive technology forward. It seems like we are hostages to Moloch, for those that understand that reference. Technology just keeps putting us in these arms races, and capitalism keeps driving the economy a certain way. It's kind of up to us as individuals to find ways to take care of each other along the way. I know about us as a company, I know about myself as a person, that I want to use this technology to make things better. So it's hard for me to really know what to say to someone that's afraid of what we're building. I understand, I wish I could give them a hug and say, look, we're building this with really good intent. We think this is already helping people. We think it will continue to help people. And as long as we are focused moment to moment on helping each other, hopefully civilization will be okay.
Yeah, I wonder if the fear that people have developed more recently, you're right, there's always been pushback when new technology arises, but now we are seeing an almost complete rejection, not just fear, but rejection of it. And this might be a reaction from the fact that people are just starting to realize how powerful these companies are. So there's a valid fear there, I believe, for people to feel. But also, I guess this is the never-ending and never-answered question: should we do it because we can?
I think, for me personally, I'm not trying to build this because we can. I'm trying to build this because I think we should. I think that shared augmented reality really is a very powerful way to communicate with each other, human to human, but also it's a very powerful way to communicate human to machine and machine to human, and not really machine to machine. They already have this form of digital communication. But to me, maybe one of the most beautiful things that can happen in the universe are moments of intersubjectivity, when two distinct minds manage to have a subjective experience together and have a moment of togetherness. I can't think of many other things that would rank, if any, that would rank higher on my aesthetics of the universe. Like, what do I appreciate the beauty of? There's something uniquely beautiful with moments of togetherness, and we should build technology that brings us closer together. I think fundamentally that clearer communication does bring us closer together. I think this is what language is for. I kind of want to draw a distinction between the internet and AI, because it's not AI alone that is so dangerous to us right now. It's the combination of AI and the internet, and the role that the internet has in how we communicate with each other, how we consume information. I am personally terrified of the fact that I already feel like I can't trust anything I see on Twitter, for example. It's very... When the recent attack in Russia happened, I felt more lost than I think I've ever felt before, because I did not feel any kind of confidence that I could find out what really happened. I've stopped trusting the internet, which maybe is good. Like, maybe that's the path we'll end up taking, and we'll just spend less time consuming information on the internet, and we will be more connected with each other locally, and AI will still have a role to play in our local communities. I still think it's like, I still want to be able to talk to an AI where I can ask, how big is this wall behind me? I want to buy a new color soundproofing. How many square meters do I need to buy? And it can help me calculate stuff. Like, I don't see the harm in helping people accomplish the things that they want to accomplish more easily with AI. But I'm afraid of fake content on the internet. I'm afraid of what happens to us as a civilization when we consume garbage information, or when we can't even tell the difference between real and garbage information. But I don't feel that spatial computing and augmented reality is particularly culpable there. Sure, like, it's part of the greater tech movement, but to me, building out the ability for machines to collaboratively perceive the world so that they can describe things spatially, so they can describe things spatio-semantically, is a good thing. It leads to clearer communication, better understanding, more togetherness, more beauty in the universe. I believe that.
Can you speak to how spatial AI is deeply connected to the user's privacy? Because maybe there's something to be understood here by anyone who's interested in this topic.
So we talk about this a lot because it's important, but spatial computing means teaching computers to perceive and understand their physical environment. And that means that physical environment is in some way perceived, captured, recorded, stored somewhere, probably, and who gets that information. I've many times used the example of AR glasses are going to have to use some kind of visual positioning system, almost certainly, to understand where they are. And visual positioning systems imply sending your camera feed to some other place to be processed, and that other place is typically owned by a company like Google. And you're then making a trade of telling Google what you're looking at so that Google can tell you where you are. There's something very, very pernicious with allowing a company to know what you're looking at all the time, especially when you combine this with the ability to maybe even know how you feel about what you're looking at. Because a lot of AR glasses are going to have the inward-looking cameras that face your eyes and measure your pupil dilation, things like this. Like, this is what makes the Vision Pro work so seamlessly, is that they're looking at your eyes, and your eyes are an externally visible part of your brain, kinda, where you can almost read thoughts by looking someone into their eyes. So in a future where a company like Google can not only see what we're looking at, but see how we're looking at it, how we feel about it, they will have an almost unimaginable amount of power to manipulate us. And if their profit motive is, knowing things about us and showing us ads and things like this, show me the incentives, I show you the behavior. What we're trying to do with the posemesh as a protocol at Auki Labs is to allow you to keep this data for yourself. If you do need a visual positioning system for your home, we want to allow you to host that visual positioning system yourself on a machine that's either yours or a machine that you trust, so that that's your data and you choose where it lives. So instead of building a world-spanning visual positioning system, which is what Google is trying to do and what Niantic is trying to do, etc., build a protocol for visiting other people's positioning systems. This means this respects privacy in a different way. If I can use, we do a lot of stuff with retail, so if I can use retail as a scenario, when you visit a grocery store, the grocery store already knows that you are there. And I think you think that's reasonable, the store thinks that's reasonable. You're a guest in the store and the store knows you're there. There's no reason for us to know it as well and for Google to know it as well. There's a bunch of actors that don't need to know that you're in the grocery store.
It knows you're there because of its cameras.
And staff, it's for thousands of years, there has been no assumption of privacy walking into a place of business because someone is there manning that place of business. We've never had completely anonymous store interactions. You're going to go past the store clerk and check out, etc. Like someone knew you were there. If you're buying an item, someone knows you were there.
And that person back in the days actually really knew who you are, knew you really well.
Absolutely. So I don't think that the expectation of privacy is that no one should know what you're up to. The people that you visit should know that you're there. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's important for Google to know that you're in the grocery store. So this is how we're trying to build the posemesh to make it so that, okay, if you want to use your AR glasses in the grocery store, then you will connect to the grocery store's positioning system. And the grocery store will know that you're there. And maybe the grocery store might spy on you then, but it's not some big multinational corporation that knows everything about you from every interaction everywhere. Right. It's that, okay, your grocery store will know more about you than it did before.
Right. So actually it's just like what the clerks back in the days will know about you. He will know a lot about you, but only him or her. It wouldn't give that data to anyone. So you're bringing back the old clerk in a digital version of.
We want the privacy equation to be between the host and the guest and not some other third party. Right. If you visit my home, I expect to know that you're in my home. Google doesn't need to know that you visited my home.
Right. That feels actually more humane than what big tech is doing. Although, are there any big tech companies who are going in what you will consider a good ethical direction?
I think Apple, very interestingly, has not gone down the really bad direction. I don't want to give them too much credit and say that they've taken some huge leap in favor of privacy and building out something that is particularly privacy preserving, but they've avoided doing things that are really bad. For example, the Vision Pro, developers cannot get access to the camera feed. So if you make an application for the Vision Pro, you have no way of spying through the camera of the Vision Pro.
Doesn't Apple do it though?
No, I don't believe that Apple does. I think that, so from what we understand, a guy named Rockwell who led the Vision Pro project, word on the street is that he only agreed to do it with the stipulation that none of the data from the Vision Pro about the environment can ever leave the Vision Pro. So it doesn't even go to Apple's computers. That's taking it very far. I think that's taking it further than is long-term realistic, because if you want to have shared AR experiences, other Vision Pros will also need to understand the environment collaboratively with you. So maybe Apple is imagining that you'll be doing peer-to-peer sharing, headset to headset. We don't know that yet, but if that's the path they're going down, that's good. That's definitely good. The path of, hey, let's both upload what we're seeing to a central cloud, like Snapchat is doing, for example, that's bad. I mean, it works. It's great that they've built it, but it's not a long-term healthy solution for society to have that kind of interaction with a vendor like Niantic or Snapchat or Google. When the novelty of AR wears off and it becomes something that we use for really important things and not just for putting funny mustaches on our face, we should make sure that we aren't giving so much of our privacy away to these companies.
Right. And so let's say that Apple goes this way with this peer-to-peer idea of sharing coordinate and special informations. How does your company fit in? Do you see opportunities for collaboration there, or?
We understand that there are more devices out in the world than Apple devices. The goal of the posemesh is to establish a universal spatial computing protocol so that self-driving cars and delivery drones and AR headsets, etc., can all communicate about space collaboratively. And if Apple builds something that looks similar to what we're building, but only for Apple users, then of course we'll feel validated in our design decisions. I mean, I do suspect that Apple is building in a similar direction, that we're trying to push the posemesh, but for Apple users only. We want to do it for everyone. We want to make a universal spatial computing protocol.
Okay. Who is currently leading the charge in the decentralization movement among AI and AR companies?
For the intersection of AI and spatial computing, it is for sure Auki Labs. We are the people pushing for this. When you follow other influencers in the spatial computing field, you will hear things like the AR cloud being something that is very important to build. But the AR cloud is exactly that centralized service that is very dangerous. Auki has pretty uniquely placed themselves as a vendor that's not going to build a cloud. We are going to build a decentralized protocol. And I've seen other smaller projects with fewer resources than we do start to tackle this as well, from the decentralization movement. But if you are not very deep into the field like I am, you will probably not have heard of them. I think Auki is already playing an important role in the spatial computing ecosystem and the decentralization ecosystem as a bridge between these two communities, where we have been lucky enough to build an audience both with traditional Web 2 spatial computing companies, hardware manufacturers, etc., but also get the ear of the decentralization movement. I feel strongly that Auki is establishing a place for itself as a leader in the decentralization of spatial data movement.
What do you say to convince people online or in real life that the posemesh is a good ethical alternative to the way that big tech is collecting data? Or a better question would be, what sort of messaging do people respond best to? Is it an alarming message about the grim future of data privacy? Or do they respond better to optimistic message about the great possibilities of a decentralized network?
It depends on who you're communicating with and what you're trying to communicate. You're certainly not going to get people excited to try new products by talking about the bad things that will happen if you don't. There is a place for both the pessimistic message because it's educational and the optimistic message because it's aspirational. The optimistic message of all the amazing things you can do with shared augmented reality, with spatial AI, these are things that might make someone understand that this technology is coming, it's good that it's coming, I want it to come, But the pessimistic message of what happens if this is done in a centralized way is also important to help people understand that their consumption choices matter. I think we have spent a lot of time talking about privacy because we had a bit of an awakening ourselves. When we first started Auki, we did not have the plan to be decentralized. I don't think everyone knows this, but when we raised our first money for building a spatial computing protocol, our pitch was, we're gonna beat Google by using the decentralization movement for data collection, by introducing a token, by introducing rewards for contributing data to our world map. We will build a better world map than Google. That was our initial pitch, that like having decentralized data collection into a centralized place can beat centralized collection in a centralized place. And we were given money. Obviously, VCs have no particular qualm with operating within this dominant business model anyhow, right? Like that's just how business is done. But then we had a crisis of conscience. I had a crisis of conscience as I started realizing the amount of power that we would have if we succeeded. And we were also interfacing a lot with the decentralization community and learning from them. In the beginning, I was a little bit dismissive of people that I felt were almost religiously and impractically advocating for decentralizing everything. But eventually I came to see that we actually have a choice as a civilization to pursue business models that don't have the pursuit of the bad outcome baked into its goals, right? Which is kind of what Google as a business has. Like the pursuit of the bad outcome kind of is its goal. It's unfortunate, but now we know. So we had this crisis of conscience and we realized that actually we need to decentralize the storage of this data. We need to let you keep your own data. We can't just make a universal positioning service to replace the GPS. We need to make a protocol for moving between positioning services that are self-owned. And that is a much bigger scope. But we could afford to dream that big because we had already gotten funded. So we were very, very lucky in a way that we got funded for a much more nefarious business model, but we got funded enough and by people that also wanted to believe in decentralization and pushed for decentralization. Early backers like Jahan Chu of Kinetic Capital and Jamie Burke of Outlier Ventures were pushing us a lot for decentralization, and I'm thankful to them now for helping us see that we can build this protocol as a part of the internet instead of as a part of my personal bank account. Right. It's an interesting mindset to build a protocol with the idea that at some point it's going to live beyond you. You're trying to build something that doesn't exist to be a business. It exists to be a civilizational service. And it's a cool headspace to get to be in. I think DePIN as a movement, decentralized physical infrastructure as a movement, is very inspiring because it seems like this new chapter in the history of human organization, where it looks like now we can have civilization scale infrastructure that is funded, owned, and operated by just people coming together into a decentralized network. And there's no corporation there and there's no government there. It's a voluntary network of people providing civilization scale infrastructure to each other.
Can you just quickly redefine DePIN one more time, just within this conversation?
Yeah, so DePIN is decentralized physical infrastructure networks. So it's a community of people that pool their physical infrastructure resources, like sensors or computers, whatever it may be, physical infrastructure, and pool them together into a service so they can provide it together. So the posemesh is a decentralized machine perception network. It's people pooling their physical infrastructure for machine perception in particular into a network so that artificial intelligences and devices can exchange spatial data and do spatial reasoning together.
So it's a network of physical devices, physical infrastructures only. There's no cloud services in there, or it's a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. There are always things that you might want to run in a cloud. We don't stop people from running things in a cloud, but we don't have a cloud that everyone sends stuff to. Like if you want to host your posemesh domain on Amazon, we don't care. You can do that. Absolutely. We don't stop you from putting it on a cloud. We try to give you the option to self-host it if you want.
Right. Eventually, if people would combine it with Amazon Cloud, that would defeat the ideological purpose of your company a little bit.
Not necessarily, because it's different. It's different still if that is their personal map hosted on Amazon's machines, because Amazon is not supposed to look at that data. Right? Like that's just a storage service at that point, not a positioning service. The positioning service is still provided by the posemesh, even if it's hosted on some AWS cloud. So no, I wouldn't see that as a defeat. Maybe it wouldn't be the most beautiful outcome where clouds are still playing such a big role, but it's not a bad outcome if people still have relationship with cloud providers, but they get to choose their own cloud provider. And there's not just this one universal, centrally controlled positioning service that everyone is at the mercy of.
Just for fun, 5 minutes, let's try to put yourself in the shoes of Sundar Pichai or anyone in Google that really has a lot of control and decision power, and you realize you have all this power in your hands. What would you do with it? Like, how would you try to navigate through this world, given the ethical issues that are presented to the public, that raises fears that we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation? How would you navigate? How would you put your company out there in a way that you don't scare people too much, but also you make sure that you build up enough capital to be the boss, the king of the jungle? What would you do?
I think you should avoid giving yourself power that you wouldn't trust someone else having. You should avoid giving yourself power that you wouldn't trust someone else having. Just because you provide a service doesn't mean that you need to exploit the data that you're collecting. We are trying to show with the posemesh that it's possible to build things in a way that doesn't put us in a position of undue power. And Sundar and Mark and everyone else, they have the same opportunity to do that. I really want to believe in Mark Zuckerberg's redemption arc. I really want to believe that he's learned a lesson from unleashing Facebook on the world and seeing what Instagram did to the world, and that his passion and interest for spatial computing will lead him to make better choices this time around. But I'm worried when I see things like Meta saying they want to start collecting anonymized data from the headset. Being a data company is just so deeply ingrained in Meta's DNA that it seems like they don't even know what to do with themselves if they're not spying on people.
Can you give a bit context? I want to dive deeper into that, but can you give a bit of context as to like what are the shifts in Mark Zuckerberg's approach to AI and data collection? I think there's something about open sourcing new language models that they have. Can you give us a bit more context?
So Meta has been open sourcing a lot of their AI work, which I appreciate, and I think that's great. And We've been experimenting with some of their open source models, and they're beautiful and very cool. And that's definitely to Meta's credit that they're doing that. On the other hand, they have a long and ongoing history of collecting data that maybe would be better not collected. And recently, they announced that they want to start collecting anonymized data from the headsets, which I wonder how anonymized you really can make that data. But they want to start collecting data of how people are using the headset. I don't know how anonymous that can be, and I understand that the information is valuable, but it's also very valuable to be able to read all of your girlfriend's text messages. It doesn't mean that you should, right? It doesn't mean that it's a good idea for you to say at the start of a relationship, let's exchange passwords for each other's phones, because we shouldn't be hiding anything. At the end of the day, it's good to establish some healthy boundaries for yourself, and I think Meta could do better with establishing some healthy boundaries for themselves. We really try to do that with the posemesh and make sure that at the protocol level, no information should be arriving at our desk that we have no business knowing. It's important. Just because we're super curious to learn things, or even sometimes because there are opportunities to maybe do something better, we need to have the discipline to say no. Now, at an application level, it's different, I think. At an application level, for example, with Convergent, the application we're making for retail staff, there are other cases for collecting data on how that specific application is being used. Where again, tying back to our earlier conversation about the expectation of privacy, there's a much more intimate relationship between us as an app developer and a retailer that is using our app and wants to learn from this data as well, and we're having conversations with them about that data. There's data we can collect as app developers that we would never want to collect as a protocol. What that means, just to be clear, is we should not, as a protocol, be receiving all of the data that the applications could be collecting individually. I shouldn't know data about the applications you develop, how they are being used. This is important. But, data is the new oil. Data is what will make kings out of AI makers, and there are enormous incentives for people like Sundar and Mark to cut corners, to win one of the most important races that there ever will be. Actually, one of the most important financial races that there ever will be. It's a lot of pressure. I'm not jealous of Sundar's position there. I can only pray that he remembers that kind of power should not be left in the hands of any individual, really.
I think it's since last year that OpenAI got under the banner of Microsoft. Is that right?
Microsoft is a large shareholder of OpenAI.
Do you think, is that the future of every smaller tech companies, to be absorbed and by and aligned with big tech and their more framework or lack thereof?
We're in an interesting time in history now where a lot of the really big companies were startups not that long ago. And they were born in startup culture and still have it in their DNA to move like a startup when they need to. Meta is a different kind of company, I think, than Intel and IBM. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I think there's something about Meta and Google and Apple that is different. And they're moving faster now. And over the last few years, they've been moving a lot faster. It does seem that under the economic system of capitalism, you will see power start accumulating in the wealthiest actors. And I would not be surprised if 20 years from now, there are fewer companies in the world, but bigger companies. I wouldn't be surprised if the S&P 500 50 years from now really is just an S&P 100 because there aren't even 500 interesting companies. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm a little scared of that development, but it's hard to stop international monopolies. It's hard.
It looks like what you're creating could help doing that, if successful. So can you imagine a future in which you are successful? Like where the posemesh is successful, where Auki Labs... I mean, should we talk about Auki Labs as a...
I think DePIN is the interesting part here, right? That DePIN is an interesting challenger to governments and organizations. Networks can be a new form of human organization that aren't centrally controlled, that aren't profit-driven in the same way that an organization is, but instead is profit-driven the way a democracy is. You know, you have a lot of people pursuing their rational self-interest. I'm hopeful that DePIN will challenge the hegemony of governments and organizations, and that more and more of our services and our infrastructure will be funded, owned, and operated by the people. This week, we had the opportunity to speak at the WOW Summit, the World of Web3 Summit in Hong Kong. And we gave a talk about Satoshi's legacy perhaps being giving AI a sense of space. The hypothesis was that DePIN is a key part in the historical development of the next generation of AI. That AI will need to collaboratively perceive the world, and the best way for that to be done is through a decentralized machine perception network. If you find this topic interesting, I would really recommend you seek out that talk and give it a listen.
Thanks, Nils.
Oh, and we recently released our white paper. That's worth mentioning also. If you want to read more about the posemesh in particular and why we're building it the way we're building it, you can go to auki.ai/whitepaper and read this enormous document that we have crafted over a very long time. A lot of heart and soul, but also blood and sweat went into producing that document. auki.ai/whitepaper. I hope it'll inspire you, and I hope you'll get in touch about helping us build it.
Thank you.
Auki Labs. Share your vision.